I am Jim Collison, live from Omaha, Nebraska, in the Gallup offices in Sydney, Australia. This is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on September 13th, 2016. Called to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during this live webcast, we do have a chat room that's available for you. It's right below the main video window, right down there. If you just look down there, you can sign in to that while we are live. If you try to do that when we're not live, no one will be there, but it's okay. If you are listening live, go down. Login button is the bottom left-hand corner. Click Login, choose the guest account, put your name in there, and hit submit, and we will take your questions during this program. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or use the contact form right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your coaching resources and StrengthsFinder training needs. There's a lot out there. You can also catch the video on both streaming and downloadable audio now for offline listening to past shows. I always say you can listen to it on a car, in a train, or in a plane. One of the best ways to catch up on everything that's going on is to get it via podcast mode on your iPhone or Android device. All the methods on getting that done are on our coaches blog. Just go to coaching.gallup.com. Ann Lingenfelter is our host today. She works as a learning solutions consultant with Gallup in our Sydney, Australia office, although sometimes we track her down in Singapore. Ann, it's great to see you, and welcome back. It's been a while since we've been in Sydney. Welcome to another Call to Coach.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here. Yes, it has been a while. I've been going back and forth between Sydney and Singapore. I was really hoping to get to the States for the summit and couldn't make it this year, but really looking forward to it. I'm putting it out there right now. I'm going to be there next year, come what may. So my guest today is Ryan McCarthy. Ryan is the commercial sales director for Stryker South Pacific. So most of our strengths enthusiasts will be familiar with Stryker. It is definitely a great example of a strengths-based organization. Ryan was previously the finance director there, and he is based in Sydney. He also happens to be a global Great Manager finalist from the Great Manager Awards that are held in Omaha. He was a finalist, one of the top 10, as a matter of fact, this year, and he was the only Australian in the top 10. So a really great example of a manager who knows how to use strengths successfully within an organization. So I thought it would be great to hear from Ryan about how he's been so successful at Stryker using strengths as a manager, and to be able to share some of the lessons that he's learned with our audience as well. So firstly, Ryan, welcome to Call to Coach, and congratulations on your recent recognition.
Thanks, Sam. It's good to be here. And yeah, I think it's a recognition that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life, to be honest. So I'm very proud and pretty humbled by it as well, to be honest.
You know, I remember getting the email when you had found out that you were a finalist, and you responded to that, and you talked about how honored you were and how excited you were. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that one of the interesting things about you, because I've had the pleasure to work with you and I know a bit about your background, is that, you know, in some ways, it's sort of a before and after story, isn't it? Even in your time at Stryker, and I think just being able to have you paint that picture will be fantastic. But first, talk a little bit about what it was like to be there at the awards and to find out that you were one of the finalists.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good way to kick off. Actually, I had I'll start with when I found out about the award. I had a phone call from my boss, Maurice, our managing director. And he said, "Oh, you know, I really need to talk to you today, Ryan." I was thinking, you know, what's gone wrong? Was it really like a tone in his voice? Anyway, so he called me in, and he started telling me this story around, you know, have you heard of this thing called the Great Manager Award? And I tried to play it down. I was like, oh yeah, I've kind of heard of it. I'd really heard of it. And he goes, so a couple of us got together and we put together a nomination for you. And at that point, I thought that was the news, because, you know, everything that came after that point always came from the context of, I work with people every day who, when there was nothing in it for them, cared about me enough to go out of their way to write this nomination about my leadership and send it through. And I was, from that point on, I was floored. And, you know, Maurice may say I teared up, but I'll deny that, obviously. But he then proceeded to tell me that, you've progressed, and, you're representing international, and then you're representing Stryker. And then he threw the big news of, you're down to the top 10 in the world. And that, I was just floored. I don't think I spoke for at least 10 seconds, which is a lot of time for me, being an activator. So, yeah, look, it was a wonderful experience just finding it that night. I was sitting on the couch at home, and it was like 11 something, and I'm pretty strict with when I try to get to bed. And I was like, why am I still awake? And it was just that truth of, I was just floating on, what a wonderful day. I just didn't want it to end. So, yeah. And then about a month later, Anne, I was in Omaha, Nebraska, and, getting stopped in the hallway of the Gallup event with these people saying, wow, you're one of the great managers. Can you tell me some, can you teach me something? Can you share something? Can you give me an example about something? And, it just felt like a celebrity, and it was humbling, and it was, and then on the awards night when I met the gentleman that won it, from Dubai, I think he was from, wonderful guy, and, had a good conversation with him, and couldn't be happier for the kind of person who ended up winning it. So all in all, just a real wonderful experience.
I want to spend some time today talking about sort of your secret to being a successful manager, your formula, so to speak. But before we go to that, tell me a little bit about the lessons that you learned about being a great manager when you were there and listened to the other winners and got to talk to them. Were there any sort of revelations that or great tips that you heard from them? Did they share their own stories?
Yeah, I didn't really get too much to share the detail of stories. It was more that connection up with people. So it was around having that conversation about how humble they were, and just in interactions with them, you could just see that it was a consistent theme. Of anyone I met in that top 10, for example, was incredibly humble. And so from a point of view of, it's only a sample of 10 great managers across the globe, but I did take something from that as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into your formula and sort of your experience as a great manager, can you let our viewers know what your top 5 is and really how you found out about those top 5 and what really resonates for you from those top 5? Sure.
Yep. I'll show you our little plaque that we have. We have these on our desks at Stryker. So I'm an activator, maximizer, responsibility, ideation, and belief. And so, I am absolutely guilty of being that top 5. I am that top 5 through and through.
And how did you find out about your top 5? Who introduced you to the concept?
Yeah, so when you join Stryker, you do the Strength Finder survey online in your first probably couple of days, and then you get a debrief. So I had a debrief with a guy I respected a lot, Barry Barakat, debriefed me, and from that point on, you kind of start a strength journey, is what I'd probably call it. And your debrief's just really the tip of the iceberg, because depending on how much you embrace strengths at Stryker, you then have an opportunity to partner up with coaches, partner up with other managers that are using strengths to, go on your own strengths journey personally, and also go on your own strengths journey in terms of how you can bring it into your leadership every day in terms of, trying to generate, better performance from your team.
And what was your journey like? I mean, you said that you certainly embrace them now. Did you embrace them at first? And if not, how did you get to the point that you are now with them?
It's a good question, because if you'd asked me at the beginning, I would have told you I was embracing them. Honestly, I would have said, yeah, I'm embracing it, I'm using it. But I don't think I really was. I think it's a bit of a spectrum, I guess. You can use strengths to be aware of it. You can kind of get to the name kind of phase of strengths and think you're really using it. And for the first period of time, say the first year, that's really where I was. I was a name and a claim, but I wasn't aiming. And I wasn't really helping others around me and the team I was leading. I wasn't actively using strengths in that first year. I probably would have talked the talk, but, really it took a bit of time for me to, build it into my repertoire as really a way I actually lead. And now it's quite central to how I lead people.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you say that, because I think no matter how long you're around it, you can be around it and it just still have a superficial understanding for quite some time, right?
Sure.
And
yeah.
And I don't know what that looks like in your experience when people are like that. But, you know, I know for me, a lot of the resources, Jim, that you guys create, the Theme Thursdays and those sorts of things are really what's helped me get beyond sort of the superficial understanding, because not until you start to see individuals who are dominant in themes and understanding how they're using them and what they have to do in order to really be turning those themes and talents into strengths. It wasn't really clear for me. So I've really found those resources to be fantastic at getting to that deeper level.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I love what you and Micah are doing. Great stuff. So, so Ryan, for you, what does that look like with your staff, you know, or people who are perhaps not, you know, not necessarily able to embrace it, just keeping it at a superficial level? And how do you get past that?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, it was my behaviour that kept others from strengths in my team, because you know the behaviour of the leader is observed. You know, that authentic. Do they really embrace strengths? And so the way I got past it was embracing it myself. And you know, I guess you know, I look back on my leadership journey. There was a point where, you know, I've been at Stryker for about 7 years, and there's a point maybe, you know, a year and a half in, I can't remember exactly the time, where I got some really tough feedback from a 360 and from Barry Barakat from work. He delivered it with a nice iron bar, didn't you, Barry? But I listened, and the feedback was around my strengths, was around my talent, was around those things where I wasn't as self-aware as I needed to be. And you know, the reality was, and like, I don't want to be dramatic, but at 18 months into Stryker, I was failing as a leader. I was absolutely failing as a leader. I'd come out of an organization where I was relatively successful, but I hadn't really developed my leadership. And you know, quite often you get put into a leadership role without the tools to do the role. And that was more obvious at Stryker because the level of leadership is higher. There's a higher expectation. So, you know, and that was the point where I really started to embrace strengths. It wasn't the only thing I did, by no means, but equally it was as powerful as anything I did. And at its heart, what strengths has allowed me to do as a leader is truly treat people as individuals and find the best in each person. And when I find the best in each person, I can typically, with my strengths and with the leadership development I've had, help get it out of them, help them see it and help them grow into it. And, you know, strengths has been almost like my little framework for doing that. I can see very clearly what a person's natural disposition is towards talent, and then I can invest in it. Whereas before, I was guessing. I was just guessing at what people were good at. It was more around what, you know, society tells me everyone needs to be this rounded individual, and that's then how I led. And when I made that switch, I play it forward, and, you know, just kind of 5 years, you know, this year, you know, I was in Nebraska winning this award, and I just look back going, wow, what a journey. And strengths has been really core in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember talking to you before, and I said, you know, what makes you such a successful manager? And you said, I have a very simple formula, and you know, and it's around selecting for the best talent, and focusing on engagement with your people, and then developing their strengths. Can you talk about what that process looks like, or maybe even share some success stories that come to mind when you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it all starts with recruitment, right? So, you know, you've got to get the right person on the bus, as Jim Collins calls it. You can say whatever you want, but the reality is talent trumps experience. And once you truly believe that as a leader, you know, you build better teams. And so, you know, a good example, you've had Nikki Luther on here and called a coach in the past. I won't hire anyone without Nikki going through the interview and Nikki giving the thumbs up, because I know Nikki Luther's done 2,000 interviews and I've done 1,000 interviews. So very much aligned with that talent theme. You know, she's individualization, maximizer, developer. She's a better natural read of talent than I am. And so I partner up on the recruitment front. We use the Gallup profiles extensively. They are spot on from my experience. It's scary how accurate they are. So we use those. And then once you've got talent, it's then around, you know, you've got a level of talent. Strengths then lets you bring that talent out. It gives you a language as a leader to use. So I believe in getting the right talent and then getting that talent focused on what the person's naturally best at. And I treat people as individuals because Strength Finder shows me how they are uniquely different. And so then I believe it. I know, instead of trying to guess at what a learner needs, I use the literature, and I develop my understanding of what a learner needs, and then I seek to give them opportunities to live that strength as often as I possibly can. And the outcome of that, I often find, to your point, is engagement. And so, I relentlessly ask my team the Q12 questions. I'll be in a one-on-one and I will ask them, do you get the opportunity to do what you do best every day? Or I'll ask them about a best friend at work, or I'll ask them about another question. And quite often, engagement and strengths just goes hand in hand. You just like that, the do what you do best every day is a really simple example, but strengths are in lots of those questions because, a best friend at work, if they may answer that no, then the opportunity is to go back to their strengths and and look through the top 10 and work with them. Well, if you don't have a best friend at work, let's look at your strengths and understand how we can use some of your strengths for you to take ownership of that. If perhaps the person has low woo, perhaps the person has low relator, whatever it could be. But when you combine strengths and engagement, you can create a better environment for the people I lead, and ultimately that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit more about the how you use the Q12 statements as talking points? There probably is a half of our audience who won't really know too much about Q12 and about the statements themselves, and those who do may think it just sort of starts and stops as an engagement survey without really understanding that it can be a framework for developing people. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. What I think is worth establishing as well is that, there's plenty of coaches that will be listening into this, is that it's one thing to coach your managers and the people you're supporting around knowing strengths. It's another thing to be able to equip them to know what the most important questions to figure out how their team is feeling. And so if you put the two together, when you're coaching people, it's great that they focus on their team's strengths. But if they don't know the key 12 questions to be asking people, they're not checking in on what those most important feeling style issues are. And so, I will use the Q12 questions. I'll actually, I won't go through all 12, but in a one-on-one with someone in my team, I will ask one of the Q12 questions to check in, how are you feeling around one of those questions? And I will then link it to strengths to help solve it. And I'm very much around empowering the team to solve it. It's not my job it is my job to facilitate it, but really I work with adults, and adults need to own their own engagement. And so we'll have a conversation about, I know it's expected of me at work, a simple example. And depending on how they answer that, we'll then work through with their strengths, how their strengths fits with that. So it could be if they've got high analytical, they may need to know more information around what's expected of them. Where a person that has high futuristic, know what's expected of them work, they can interpret that question somewhat differently. They can see it more as about their future, what's expected of me in the mid to long term. So depending on the individual's frame of reference from a strengths perspective, they see all the Q12 questions quite differently. And my actions as a leader is quite different as well. So I basically use two tools that aren't me. I put them together, and then I just actually listen to what they're saying, essentially, instead of me trying to guess and work out what to do. You just look at the research. The research has been done. There's 12 questions you need to be checking in on, and people naturally are better at some things than others. What a novel concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So when someone walks in and they have a certain job description, it sounds like you're asking them to really be creative and come up with the ways they can use their strengths to address get the job done that they need to get done.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're definitely, it's not like you're saying, okay, because you're a high achiever, I'm going to have you do A, B, and C. It's very much about them figuring it out or working together with you in a collaboration. Is that right?
Spot on. Yeah, so I'm yet to find a top 10 that isn't sufficient for a person to do their role. I'm yet to find it. You know, the depth of a top 10, the complexity of just the top 10. We're not talking the 34, just the top 10. There are things to use in anyone's top 10 to deliver most outcomes that you're seeking, you're tasking them with. So I will find something in someone's top 10 to fit with the task. Now, the catch with that is where there's greater alignment, I've often found the greatest performance. So, I'll give quite a specific example if that's okay. I'm sure Shireen won't mind me sharing this one because it's great performance as well. But so Shireen, I've got a lady in my team, Shireen, she's a contract specialist, which means she completes tender submissions to our government for healthcare, right? Now, Shireen has learner and maximizer high. So she may need to do a submission on supply chain. So she has to write up why Stryker's great at supply chain. So Shireen will go off and learn all about supply chain, and she's passionate about that, and she'll seek to maximize information to put a great submission together. Right? So she was already a strong performer from that point of view, and that was just 2 strengths. But Shireen also has intellection, and she also has input. So, and this is where strengths gets really powerful. When you can go beyond 1 or 2, and you can bring in a 3rd or a 4th into a role, I've found you get the whole next level of performance. So let's use this as an example. Okay, so historically, Shireen would have just done the submission. She would have learned all about supply chain and just written a great submission and moved on. But then when you bring input in and intellection in, we then established with Shireen also, she's a very self-aware lady, around that input is about trying to make things useful. And there's a little bit of that useful over time. I'm not collecting something to just give it off once. I want this to be, useful over time. It's a bit of her responsibility coming in there, but useful over time. And intellection, she really thinks through it and wants to distill it all down and make it really clear. So let's put this together. She learns all about supply chain because she's a passionate learner. She seeks the great bits from it, the maximizer. She then thinks through how to use this ongoing and the intellection, how to make this really clear and simple. And she thinks through how are her users going to use this information. And where she got to was she built a tender library. So instead of just doing individual responses, she's then built a capability around this tender library that hits her input. It hits her intellection because she really thinks through how people are going to use it. It hits a maximizer because it's great and it's lasting over time. And it hits a learner because she really gets to find a repository for all her information that she's gone and learned, so it becomes more useful. So what I'm saying here is that, yes, you can use a top 10 for any role, but where you get greatness is where you can find people you're leading, more of their strengths aligning to that responsibility that they have. And with Shireen creating a tender library has had a marked difference on our success rate in tenders. So to put this in perspective, our tender win rate, when we started early on, was around the 30 to 40% mark. Our tender win rate last year ended up in the 70 percentile mark. So remember, we have 30-odd% market share, so we're winning twice our rate of market share. So, this is a very clear example of where strengths equals performance and just being able to pull it all together.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, and I just noticed in the news that Stryker won the best workplaces best place to work award in Australia this year. It came number 2, I guess it was.
Yep.
So that's just again a phenomenal achievement. It's I love when I hear people say about strength, so it's something soft, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to result in performance. I always think about you guys and how what amazing performance and success you're having in the market, and often use you guys as a one of many examples. But certainly congratulations for that too.
So I think that it's a great point we do. Strengths is part of one of the key tools we do use for performance, and different teams use it at different rates. But, I'd say to any of the coaches out there, I've been in an environment that's using strengths, and there is a correlation between managers that use strengths do get very good results. There are managers that don't use strengths that get good results too. I'm not saying it's the only way, but I am saying that from an engagement point of view, from a business results point of view, from a retention point of view, I've definitely seen it, and we've seen it as an organisation.
Yeah. So what do you do when you have an individual contributor who's not into strengths, you know? I mean, oftentimes we hear the flip side where people are saying, you know, I want my manager to use strengths in my department, and, you know, he or she isn't interested. When you are the person who's driving it and really interested in it, what happens if you have someone in your team who's just, you know, not comfortable with it?
Yeah, okay, yep. So it does happen, absolutely. You know, and it depends. You know, sometimes it's the person with really high analytical that just needs more information. So, you know, the simple answer is it depends on who the person is as to what approach I'll take. So, you know, a person with high analytical, I'll seek to give them the facts. So there's wonderful research out there around engagement. Gallup's got some wonderful papers around sales results, around retention. The data's there. So if it's a person with high analytical, or, you know, it could be something similar to that, even learner would fit really in there as well, maximizer, I'll go to the results. Say if it's a person with activator, you know, where they're really, perhaps they're more experiential, they really want to live it and see it, I will make sure they get really early coaching. You know, I'll help them experience it firsthand. And so I guess the short answer is, like I said, is that you've really got to speak to the individual's strengths to be able to get them to see strengths for what it truly is. And if you kind of tailor it to their strengths, like always, you typically get a better answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we talked about previously was competencies, and you know, some organizations will say, you know, how do you align strengths with competencies? What happens at Stryker in that way?
Yeah, so we have a competency framework. So it's we've had a couple, but we've got a more recent one. It's very sophisticated, and I think it's very clear as well, which is very helpful. And I know a lot of leaders use it across the organisation. It's a good tool. I really find that strengths is probably the level after competency, in my opinion. It's kind of, you know, competency is more about an average. It's around trying to create an archetype of behaviour of, you know, what's the standard almost. And it's wonderful for performance management. It's wonderful for management. I don't think it's as good for leadership. And, you know, there is a big difference, right? So what I'm saying is that strengths is all about the individual. Competencies is more about the average. So as a leader, when you're living in strengths land, you're living in what are the unique differences about this person I'm leading, and how can they use it to achieve an outcome? When you're living in competency land, you're more living in, you know, what are the minimum competencies that I need this person to be doing, or what are the competencies I need them to be doing? They could be stretch competencies as well, but you're not really factoring in that each person is so different. And so for me, I would say strengths trumps competencies, but equally as an organisation, I know from particularly a big organisation, competencies are critical in terms of ensuring that, you know, you keep the bar at a certain level.
Yeah, absolutely. So to switch gears a little bit, I'd love to be able to talk about strengths outside the workplace. I mean, is it something that you use in your life, you know, outside Stryker?
Yeah, no, it is actually. So, you know, I do, and my team does as well. You know, I've got a couple examples that I could share there. So my marriage, okay, so I'm married to Sonia, you know, best thing that ever happened to me. Everything great really comes after that moment I meet my wife, right? And that is just how it is. And when I discovered Sonia had competition, achiever, individualization, just all the light bulbs just went off. I just had that moment of understanding my wife to another level. And same as for her to understand that I've got this, you know, really severe activator at the front and center of who I am. She can see when I don't finish things, or when I don't follow something through, or I get really excited. You know, there's no friction in that. My wife's very versed in strengths, and she has the language, and she, you know, she's quite aware with it. So in my marriage, I've absolutely used it. I'd say, you know, just from a frequency point of view, that's one of the biggest impacts for me. Being around, we understand each other better, and we're a better team because we do genuinely value each other's strengths. I love her individualization. She reads people far better than I do, and that's a, you know, beautiful talent that, you know, she shares with me. So there's that. I use it at my church. So I'm a very active member of my church, and I've shared strengths amongst the church. I know, so our senior minister uses it very actively as well. It's created a lot of self-awareness, and he uses the language. And that's a really powerful thing, to be able to take something that works in the workplace and bring it into something that's so critically important to who I am. And once again, see the benefit. Like, this isn't a nice to have. This is, I see the benefit with my minister. He's more effective because he's more self-aware, as an example. High intellection, high strategic, high ideation. He can be in his head, and he's one of the smartest people I've ever met. But now, him understanding I've got the activator, maximizer strengths, our partnership is so much better. So, we can he accesses some of my strengths, I access some of his strengths, and we work a lot better together.
So did you introduce it to your faith community, or was it there already?
Yeah, no, I introduced it. Yep. So on our parish council, so the leadership group across the church, we all did strengths, and we've had a good conversation around strengths, and people are more aware of each other's. And then particularly with the minister, I've spent a lot more time with Michael and working on strengths and us talking about strengths together. But yeah, I introduced it in, and Michael's run with it as an example since.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are churches in the States, I know, that have entire strengths-based ministries, and they do cell group studies on living your strengths. So there are some Gallup resources in our faith practice. If online, there's some resources there. So they have cell groups, and they do video studies and all of that. And it's something that there's sort of different touch points within the Christian walk, or that we'll talk about, when kids are about to graduate, or when they're about to get married, or about to start a family, all those different places being great entry points and touch points to have strengths conversations within a church community.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's been, my experience. I can see that strengths can bring congregations together by creating just the understanding of each other. I can see it can be around, the volunteering you do within your community. And this doesn't have to be church. This could be any kind of mission work you want to do around a not-for-profit type work. Mm-hmm. But the reality of it is that anytime you're encountering people and they're trying to work together, they are, in my, from my faith point of view, I do believe people are designed to be the way they are. So it's about embracing, that design. And other people can see it different ways. Don't tell me the wrong way. I'm not trying to push that. But I'm just saying that when you're encountering people, they're all different. If you can use strengths to understand that, you just create a better team, and you create a more enjoyable team, and then you get better results. And that's what it's about. So,
yeah. Absolutely. We all of us who embrace it understand the aspect of it being a relational shorthand, and it really is. I mean, it helps sort of eliminate that friction between whether it's in a workplace or in a family or in another community. Because we understand. It's that bringing of understanding. Oh, that's why that person is being that way. It's not about me. It's about them, right?
Exactly.
Makes so much difference. One thing I'm interested in, when you were talking about the fact that you use it so powerfully in your marriage, did you introduce your wife to it, or
Yes.
did she find out you did? So tell me a bit about that, because sometimes partners can't hear it from their partner. They need
We have that a lot in our team at work. There's some partners that have been reluctant to do it, and there's others where the whole family have done it, including grandmas and things like that. My wife took to it really quickly. She loved it. High individualization, so she's fascinated by differences in people, and she could see I loved it as well. So that was actually really easy. But you're right, there are a number of people that can be a bit close to. I still can't get my parents to do it, to put it in perspective. My sisters have done it, my best friend's done it, other friends have done it, but I can't get my parents to do it. So I'm still working on that.
Yeah, well, good luck. Good luck with that. I know I had to work on my family a bit, but they're pretty positive about it now, and because they've seen the value. So I think that's that's where it happens. Yeah. Jim, are there any questions from your side or anything from the chat room that perhaps we should pose to Ryan before I move on to the next one?
Yeah, a couple. JB's out there, and he says, and this would be like a management question for you. So as a manager, how do you encourage people to try tactics that may not always work well for them using their talents? As an example, a learner, there's different ways of maximizing or using that learner talent. And sometimes you have to kind of go through a couple iterations. As a manager, any experience with that? And how do you encourage people to kind of keep trying until they find that sweet spot?
Yeah, it's a good question. So once, say with learner, to use the example, so there's a lot of tools that can help, right? So learning styles, a really good example with learner is that, helping empower that person's learner strength, them to understand it, helps them take ownership of it. And so my model's less around, or the way my approach is less around telling someone to go and do something. I will point them towards resources which they then choose from. I'm very careful not to prescribe where they need to take their learner. I give them options, and it goes back to, I guess, my choice as a leader. I choose to lead my team always as adults. I seek to give them opportunities to own their own roles, own their own development. And for a number of years, to be honest, I haven't had to really say, you need to go and do this. It's normally been, here's some options. Here's what I like about the different options. Here's how they'd fit to your strengths. Potentially, here's some people you can connect up with, or some resources you can connect up with, as opposed to a prescription.
Yeah, good. There's just some great ways to, I think as you study the people, I wrote down, and as a manager, I need to continue to study my people. This is what I hear in you, study my people better. It's just one of those things where to have those top 5 in front of them all the time. We roll through, my people now are interns, and we roll through those guys pretty quick. They're not always here, but it's an important thing to have that list in front of me. I think you're probably in that boat. You've worked on it enough, right, that you can, if you named one of your people, you could pretty much probably tell me 2 or 3 things about them based on their top 5. I get that feeling. Any tips around that? Like, some managers create books where they keep notes, they've got pictures and, whatever. Anything you did to kind of keep that top 5 fresh and top of mind for you?
Yeah, so look, my answer is going to be very particular to my strengths, but I just have to use it. I just have to use it over and over. I start my one-on-ones talking through top 5. I think through top 5. I don't do that once I've been leading a person for a period of time, because I've kind of gone past that. But early on, I will get a person to say what their top 5 is, and then we'll quickly talk about their top 5. So I keep bringing it top of mind. And by me helping them, that kind of really embeds it in me. So that's kind of one of the approaches I take. We all have like these plaques on our desk. So at any point in time, everyone in the entire office, not just my team, has their strengths listed up there, so you can kind of see it. Something I've found worked is in our team meetings. So we have a monthly team meeting. It's almost like a subject on itself, but one of the things that the person who hosts the team meeting, so a team member runs the team meeting, different person each month, they have to present on their top 5 or top 10 and their bottom 5. And so they will actively come, and they will have had a debrief, and Nikki Luther's my business partner, so she will have debriefed them, and then they'll come and they'll claim their strengths. And then there's these beautiful conversations that happen in our team where you've got people asking each other about their strengths, not leader follower, people in the team who are adults and empowered. And I have a very high performing team asking each other. And then you get these confessions of, I do struggle with woo, for example. One of the ladies in our team has low woo and she owns it. And there's another lady in our team who has high woo. And so when they go to so these kind of conversations are created in those team meetings, but then they translate into actual behavior, because when there's a sales meeting and there's 200 sales reps in the room, those 2 ladies partner each other, and the lady with high woo, Nikki, takes the other lady around with her, and starts up the conversations. And then this other lady, Shireen's relator kicks in, and then she's fine from that point on. But they kind of, that open dialogue, open conversation, they then help each other. Because they help each other, they connect deeper. We get better results. We all enjoy working together more. It kind of, this kind of, self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Yeah, it's a great reminder. Here on the riverfront in Omaha, we've actually started putting strengths exercises on sheets in the conference rooms. And, you'd think that would be something that, would, hey, you're Gallup, you would start the meetings. We have to be reminded. And I went to a meeting today that I was running. And they were like, hey, you want to start? I'm like, we don't have time for that. Let's get going. It was about webcasts. That's the funny thing. It's about this. And it's a great reminder, right? I think we all need to be reminded from time to time that it's a great. I was telling you a story about our interns that this summer, our high school interns started every day with their top 5. And they would just go around a circle and start with their top 5 and then say what they'd done yesterday, what they were going to do today, and any barriers. Mm-hmm. And so just a great reminder, great to hear that from you as well, that the continued emphasis, that's one of those things I should implement more, is when somebody comes in and they sit down, I just say, tell me your top 5. Let's talk for 5 minutes about, instead of fantasy football, let's talk for 5 minutes about your top 5. I think that's a great idea. JB's got another question too. He says, how do strengths, and this has to do with that concept of emotional intelligence. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he says, how do strengths and emotional intelligence work together in your experience? So how have you seen those two play out together?
Yeah, so look, emotional intelligence, big topic for a start. So I think there's an overlap. Let me try to answer it focusing on strengths rather than comparing the two. I find different kind of combinations of strengths will lend themselves to being much more, say, emotionally aware or self-aware or things like that. So, typically as you start to get used to different strengths combinations, you can spot ones that are probably a little bit more in tune with how other people are feeling, which is more the emotional intelligence side than other people. So you get a person without any of the people themes in their top 10. That's then, can often translate into probably slightly lower emotional intelligence. But I think it's more a frequency thing that we all need to understand. It's not that a person without it in their top 10 doesn't have a high emotional intelligence. It's you probably just don't see it all that much. So in that situation, that person probably needs to have strengths partners or strengths pairs to help partner them up to activate that. So I'm a good example, right? So I have relator at number 9, and so there's no other people strengths in my top 10. I have a bottom 5 of empathy, harmony, consistency, right? So you get the picture. Have been known to leave body bags. Yes, that was an early challenge for me. Yes, part of my early failure. Yep, guilty. Got it. Okay. But I've got a business partner, Nikki Luther, who has high empathy, individualization, developer, very high frequently thinking about how people feel around me, around her. So I use my maximizer responsibility themes and activator themes to make sure before I actually activate, I'll check in with her, and I'll check in to try to use her higher EQ, I guess, to help me. And I've got people in the team now that have joined more recently, a lady, Selena, individualization, empathy, she just gets it. She can see how a person's feeling as they're walking down the hallway, and trying to bring those people out into the team. So emotional intelligence then becomes more of a team concept than an individual concept, because we all know great teams are just great combinations of strengths and talent. And then if as a leader you can identify that person in your team that really high frequency is thinking about how people feel, and this is Selena in our case, Selena then actively plays that role in our team, and it's celebrated. She's the ones that gives the personalized gifts. She's the ones that spots when one of the ladies' cats dies recently. She just spots it, and then she helps us to share it. And so, going back to kind of the shorthand of this answer is that emotional intelligence is very important, especially around self-awareness. but you can get around it, and you can actually embrace strengths to create a team where it's like everyone has amazing emotional intelligence.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great answer in having that awareness to that we are emotional beings. I think sometimes we can approach strengths from a very there's some touchy-feely ones in there, but sometimes we get very we get very unemotional about it. Like I'm an activator. This is what I do.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes our emotion drives those as much as there's theme dynamics. I think our emotions play into that as well. So I really appreciate that answer. Yeah. And as we come up on our final few minutes here, I'll throw it back to you for some final thoughts and questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what would be a great way to end it, really, Ryan, would be if you have any resources or tools or blogs or anything else that you find that you really like to couple with strengths, or you think sort of integrates really well with the philosophy that you use in the workplace or in other areas of your life.
Yeah, sure. So, perhaps I could share some of the ways I use the strength tools, and that kind of got a different slant on it, if it's okay. So an example would be onboarding. So I use strengths very early in an onboarding process. So I've recently hired a new manager, an incredibly talented guy, hasn't had exposure to strengths previously, has taken to it very, very well. You can see it, high individualization, things like that. So in the onboarding process, he's got a team that's already using strengths. He hasn't had much exposure. The way I help onboard him into the team is I do a debrief of him in front of the team member. And then I do a debrief of the team member in front of him. And so we're in my office and we're doing this debrief. We're using the kind of the strengths cards and things like that. I don't know if you can see those. And we're talking about strengths. Each person, I give them the list of the questions that comes out of that strengths coaching kit. I give them a list of questions, and then they ask each other strengths questions. And it's just such a simple way to use strengths, and it just speeds up that onboarding process so much. You just watch the two people connect because they're seeing real self. They're talking about what's really important. They're figuring out how they're going to work together better. They're calling out the watch outs nice and early. They're figuring out where the top 5 and the bottom 5 clash. So that's an example of where I use the resources for onboarding. I use strengths in projects as an example. So when we're kicking off projects, we don't start a project until a person will claim how they're going to aim their strengths to achieve the project outcome. So going back to that tender library example, Shireen would talk about how she's going to use her strengths to deliver the project. And it's just such a simple way to help a person own the outcome, own their strengths, and figure out how to use the best bit of themselves to achieve it. So I do things like that. I do team building activities around strengths. So, a simple example that we've found worked is probably worth Googling this one, but there's a game called Helium Rod. Helium Rod is you grab like a really thin stick and you put 6 odd people and they've just got to put their finger under the stick, and I don't want to ruin it, but basically when they all put their finger on, if they're not touching it, the whole game starts again. And so what plays out is you get this group behavior that's quite intense. And then I just stand there and observe, and I'll pause them every now and again, and I'll make strengths-based observations. So you'll hear the people with ideation. You'll hear the people with activator. Let's just try. You'll hear the people with, that really want to sit back. And then the people with the high feeling themes, I then use that as an example to somewhere in the middle of the meeting, I grab the people with high empathy and I ask a question along the lines of, so how are people feeling? And that question unlocks the answer is that people are worried about their finger coming off. So what's the implication? So when they do that, I then ask the analytical person or the strategic person to say, so what could be the possible outcomes that come with that? Well, then everyone's trying to keep it on, so that's why it's going up. And so then you use the feeling people to establish that it's okay if we fail. And you just watch people embrace the greatness in each other's strengths. And that kind of activity, everyone laughs and all that kind of stuff, but you get these wonderful strengths moments in play. So there's a couple of examples.
Yeah, no, those are great. Thank you for sharing those. Is there anything before we end that I should have asked or that you would like to say that you feel is important to mention before we close?
Look, self-awareness. I think this is one of the, for anyone coaching anyone, I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but the true power, one of the true powers of strengths is self-awareness. A leader understanding their own behaviors, understanding why they behave that way, understanding what the basements of their strengths look like, what the balcony looks like, empowering a leader with that knowledge, and that leader empowering others around a self-awareness point of view is just such a fundamentally powerful use of strengths. And, I've seen, a guy on my team, Kyle, he was just saying this recently, is that he has woo high. He had a lot of surface level relationships, very basement use of woo, just helping him understand what woo can be, that woo can be so much more than that. He now tells stories about, previously out of work, he had lots of surface level friends, and now he's been using other strengths like communication and achiever and focus and other things like that, just to be more aware of how he can activate the balcony of woo. And he now talks about making better connections and, having these more meaningful conversations. And this self-awareness element of strengths, that alone is worth all the investment in strengths from a leadership point of view. And then you get all the other performance benefits that come out of it. But self-awareness, I reckon, is really at the heart of it.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's great to bring that out. Thank you very much for joining us. We certainly appreciate it. I'm sure that all of our listeners and viewers will as well. It's good to spend an hour with one of the world's best managers. So,
what was that? I didn't hear
it. Well, for Ann, I'll say it again. Ryan, thanks for coming on. And it is true. It's hard to get to that spot with us, and you did it. So thanks for spending some time with us and all the great wisdom that you displayed. There's a lot of great spots to take notes. So if you've been watching this video and you haven't been taking notes, head back, replay it, and take some great notes. I love your Q12 idea. And, by the way, the Q12 every week, if you did one question a week for 12 weeks, that's about a quarter. And you could get through that 4 times in the course of a year. So super simple, right? Think about that from a management standpoint. A super simple question to ask. The Millennial Report is telling us that these millennials want more coaching more often, right? Not the annual review, but constant feedback. And what a great way to get feedback from them, but to take those Q12 questions, right?
Oh, well said,
ask
Jim.
Those. Yeah. So great technique indeed. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center, just GallupStrengthsCenters.com. Send us your questions or comments. If you'd like to be a guest blogger, we got some, we'll consider those. Send those to us, coaching@gallup.com. You can also catch the recorded audio and video of this program, as well as all the past ones and all the links to like our Facebook group and YouTube page, iTunes and RSS feeds, iPhone and Android apps, an updated iPhone app, by the way. If you want to head out there, all the schedule for our weekly Strengths Wisdom, which goes around Theme Thursday, it's available at our coaches blog. Tons of info, tons of free info at our coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, you can also get a list of all our courses that are available to do that. And Ann, I think we have some courses coming up there, both in Auckland and in Sydney by the end of the year, right?
Yes, we do. We have some, one in Auckland, it is October 17th to 20th. We have one in Sydney, end of November, and we have one in Singapore next week, and then another one end of November in Singapore. So they're all over the place.
Not too late. You go to courses.gallup.com, and if you have any questions, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or you can use the contact form right there on the page, and we'll get right back to you. We talked about Beyond Your Top 5, which means unlocking all 34. That's available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just go to GallupStrengthsCenter.com and click on Learn More in the Strengths Finder tab, and there's some information about their upgrading from top 5 to all 34. We recommend you get a coach when you do that. That's a great time to engage a coach if you've just done your top 5. And if you want to do that, again, GallupStrengthsCenter.com. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you please share it. Well, thank everyone for joining us today. We'll look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.